Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something, well, fundamental to being human, something we engage with every single day, often without even realizing its incredible complexity.
That's right.
The human promise. It's just so much more than a simple verbal agreement, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's this, living, breathing thing encompassing our commitments, the expectations we build, the bedrock of trust, our hopes for the future.
Yeah, interdependence.
Interdependence, exactly.
Yeah.
And even how we define ourselves.
It really is the invisible architecture, the scaffolding upon which our societies and personal lives are constructed.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes this particular exploration so compelling, I think, is that we're using a really cutting-edge tool to examine this age-old concept, artificial intelligence.
Right.
We'll be drawing insights from the source, understanding the human promise with AI to really sort of get under the skin of what a human promise actually means.
Okay, let's dive right in then. Where does this whole idea of making and keeping promises even start? Take us back, way back.
Well, the source material points pretty clearly towards the development of more intricate social structures. And crucially, language. Those seem to be the key factors.
Language.
Think about early farming communities, right? Coordinating hunts, dividing up gathered resources, organizing defense these activities, they would have required some level of understood commitment.
Some shared understanding.
Exactly. Some way to signal intent and build reliability within the group. You needed that trust.
So those first sort of shared understandings within a tribe, maybe even before really sophisticated language, those were the earliest forms of the promises we know today. That's a fascinating thought.
It seems likely, yeah.
And how can AI possibly shed light on something that ancient? Seems like a huge leap.
Well, what's truly remarkable is AI's ability to analyze patterns across just vast data sets. It's incredible.
Okay.
So, for instance, by applying natural language processing, NLP, to the remnants of early languages, AI could potentially identify shifts. Shifts in the usage and the connotations of words related to obligation, trust, agreement, over centuries.
So it's seeing the language evolve around these concepts.
Precisely. Imagine AI noticing, say, a significant increase in vocabulary around shared responsibility, just as agricultural settlements develop.
Ah, okay.
That would suggest a growing importance of mutual commitment, wouldn't it?
That's like AI acting as a linguistic archaeologist.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
And we see how these early forms of promises, they clearly evolved into the cornerstones of civilization, right? You think about treaties between emerging societies.
Absolutely.
The very foundations of legal systems, even the covenants within religious traditions, all built on the power of a promise.
Exactly. Promises have served as the sort of essential glue for human organization on every scale imaginable.
Right.
And as the source material reminds us, the consequences of upholding or betraying promises throughout history have been immense, just huge.
Yeah, you can see that clearly.
Think of how broken treaties have ignited conflicts, or how the promise of freedom, when it's unfulfilled, has fueled entire revolutions.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Can AI actually help us understand those ripple effects? The impact of promises kept or broken on these massive historical events?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, AI definitely has the capacity. It can analyze historical documents and narratives on an unprecedented scale.
Just churning through data.
Right, searching for correlations between specific instances of promises being made or broken and then, subsequent periods of societal stability or upheaval.
Okay.
Using techniques like event correlation, even attempting to infer causal links, AI might be able to detect patterns in the historical record that we humans, just limited by the sheer volume of information, might overlook.
Like what kind of patterns?
Well, for example, AI could potentially identify recurring linguistic markers, certain phrases or tones, in diplomatic correspondence that consistently preceded the collapse of alliances, maybe linked to perceived breaches of faith.
Wow. It almost makes you wonder if AI could pinpoint the exact moment a broken pledge shifted the course of history. That's quite something.
That's a powerful thought.
Now let's jump forward, way forward, to our modern era. Promises look, well, quite different in our digital lives, don't they?
Oh, definitely.
We're bombarded with privacy policies, terms of service, digital promises of sort, I guess.
Yeah, they are.
But most of us just scroll through and click agree without a second thought. I mean, who reads all that?
Nobody. And this raises a really important question about the nature and the impact of promises in our increasingly digital world.
Right.
These online agreements, they represent a new kind of promise, but The sheer volume, the complexity, plus the global scale, it creates huge challenges.
Challenges in terms of what?
Yeah.
Understanding them,
Yeah.
enforcing them.
All of the above. Understanding, upholding, enforcing them. It's tricky on a global level.
And AI has a role to play in navigating this digital promise landscape too, doesn't it? It's not just about analyzing the past.
Exactly. AI can actively monitor the vast, real-time data streams of our digital interactions, social media conversations, news reports, even the code underlying digital contracts.
So it's watching everything.
In a sense, yes. To track how promises are evolving right now in contemporary society, it can also analyze patterns of trust and distrust in online communities.
Giving us a snapshot.
Exactly, a dynamic snapshot of the current state of digital promises and, importantly, the factors influencing whether people think they're reliable or not.
Okay, so promises have this deep historical context. They've evolved into the digital age. But what about our biological makeup? Is there something innate in us, something in our biology that makes us prone to making and expecting promises?
Well, the source is clear that there isn't a specific promise gene, nothing like that.
Right, okay.
But the underlying cognitive abilities that enable promise making, those are certainly rooted in our biology, our capacity for social cognition.
Understanding others.
Right. Understanding others' intentions, experiencing empathy, planning ahead, these are all products of our brain's evolution.
Makes sense.
For instance, our brain's reward system, it gets activated not just when we receive something good, but also when we fulfill a commitment we've made.
Ah, so it feels good to keep a promise biologically.
It seems so. It reinforces that promise-keeping behavior.
So while we're not born with a contract stamped in our DNA, our brains are sort of wired to support these kinds of social agreements. How can AI help us understand that biological connection more deeply?
Well, what's fascinating here is the potential for AI to analyze really complex neurological data, like fMRI scans.
Brain scans.
Yeah, brain scans of people maybe in controlled experiments as they make and either keep or break commitments.
Okay.
By identifying the specific neural pathways and activation patterns associated with these behaviors,
Yeah.
AI can contribute to a more nuanced understanding of the biological mechanisms underneath promise-making and how we react when they're fulfilled or broken.
And that helps AI itself.
Potentially, yes. It could help refine AI models of human decision-making, making them maybe more aligned with our actual biological predispositions.
Now let's turn to the realm of philosophy, always a deep area. What insights do the great thinkers offer us on the very essence, the whatness of a human promise?
Oh, philosophically, promises touch upon some really fundamental questions, big ones, about ethics, the nature of reality, how we know things.
Epistemology, metaphysics?
Exactly. In ethics, you've got the classic debate, deontology versus consequentialism.
Right. Duty versus outcome.
Precisely. Is there an inherent moral duty to keep a promise just because you made it? That's deontology. Or do you judge the morality based on the outcomes? Is it sometimes okay, even right, to break a promise if it leads to a better overall result?
Tricky.
Very. Then metaphysics explores things like free will, did you really freely make that promise? And causality, the link between the promise and its fulfillment. And epistemology asks, how can we ever truly know if a promise is sincere when it's made?
That's some serious intellectual territory. How can AI even begin to grapple with these abstract philosophical concepts? Seems like a mismatch.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture again, AI can be trained on just vast libraries of philosophical texts.
That reads philosophy.
Essentially, yes. Learning the different schools of thought, the arguments around promises, then it can be used as a tool.
A tool for what?
To analyze real-world scenarios involving promises. It could help categorize them according to different ethical frameworks, or identify potential philosophical dilemmas based on these principles it's learned.
So it's like AI is a philosophical assistant.
Kind of, yeah. Think of it as providing a framework for ethical analysis, much like a philosopher might approach a complex case study.
It's almost like having a tireless philosophical sparring partner that can dissect arguments with, well, cold, hard logic.
In a way, yes.
What about the actual act of keeping a promise? What core philosophical ideas come into play there specifically?
Yeah, this gets to the heart of concepts like integrity, right? The consistency between what we say we value and what we actually do.
Walking the talk.
Exactly. And the notion of duty or obligation that arises specifically from making that promise. It's about aligning our internal intentions with our external behavior, even when it's tough or inconvenient.
And can AI help us better understand this intricate link between intention and action when it comes to promises?
I think so. AI can construct logical models that represent sort of the necessary conditions for a promise and the potential chain of consequences.
If this, then that.
Right. Consequences that follow from either keeping or breaking it. By simulating various outcomes based on different assumptions about intent and external factors, AI can provide insights into the logical structure of promising.
Helping us reason about it more clearly.
Exactly. Aiding in more reasoned decision-making, potentially.
Okay, moving into what might seem like a completely different domain now. How do fields like physics and mathematics intersect with the idea of a human promise? It feels like a bit of a stretch, honestly.
You're right, it does seem like a stretch. Physics and mathematics don't understand a promise in the human sense, obviously.
Okay.
However, they provide the fundamental tools and frameworks that AI uses to model and analyze certain aspects of promising.
How so? Physics, for example.
Well, physics deals with the transmission of information, right? The sound waves carrying a spoken promise, the light signals on a screen displaying a written one. That's physics.
Okay, the delivery mechanism.
And the consequences of broken promises can sometimes manifest in very physical ways. Organized protests, sadly, even acts of violence, those have physical dimensions.
Okay, I can see the very tangible endpoints there. But what about the more abstract world of math? How does that connect?
Mathematics offers some really powerful frameworks for analyzing the dynamics of promises. Game theory, for instance.
Strategic interactions.
Exactly. It provides models for understanding situations where trust and promises play a crucial role, like negotiations or long-term collaborations. Then there's probability theory.
Likelihood of keeping it.
Right. Assessing the likelihood of a promise being kept based on various historical data, contextual factors, and formal logic gives us a structured way to represent agreements and, importantly, detect inconsistencies.
So AI is essentially leveraging these mathematical tools, game theory, probability, logic, to break down and analyze the patterns within the human phenomenon of promising.
Precisely. AI algorithms, things like Bayesian networks, can infer the probability of a promise being fulfilled by looking at historical data and context. And something like graph theory can be applied to map out complex networks of promises within a social group or an organization, revealing dependencies and potential weak spots, points of failure.
Interesting. Let's delve into the internal structure of a promise itself. You mentioned logic. It seems like there's a natural order of operations involved, right?
Yeah, the source highlights a pretty clear logical sequence inherent in a promise. First, the promiser forms an intention.
Okay, the thought.
Right, the intention to act in a certain way. Second, they declare that intention, they actually make the promise, say the words, or write it down.
The declaration.
And finally, there's the action, or ideally, the action of fulfilling that promise.
Intention, declaration, action.
Exactly. So a breach of promise introduces a logical disconnect, right? A failure of the intended action to actually happen after the declaration. There's an inconsistency.
And AI, with its strength in logic, can spot those disconnects.
Yes, potentially. AI systems using formal logic can represent promises in a structured way and then automatically detect inconsistencies between, say, stated intentions, the declared promise, and the observed outcomes.
Where would they be useful?
Well, you could imagine it in areas like contract verification or auditing commitments made by companies or governments.
But what about the very human element, the state of mind of the person making the promise? Surely, whether they are sincere or maybe deceitful or pressured, that profoundly impacts the promise itself.
Oh, absolutely it does. The promiser's sincerity, whether they're acting under duress, even their emotional state at the time.
Right.
All of these factors can significantly influence both the likelihood of the promise being kept and the moral weight we assign to it. It's not just logic.
Emotions are key.
Definitely. Emotions like trust, hope, anger, regret, they're all deeply interwoven with the dynamics of promising and what happens afterwards.
So how can AI, which operates on data and algorithms, possibly account for something as nuanced and subjective as someone's internal state? That seems like the hardest part.
It is challenging, no doubt, but this is where fields like sentiment analysis and emotional AI become relevant.
Okay, explain those.
These technologies try to analyze linguistic cues, the words people use, the tone in spoken or written language. They can also look at facial expressions in video, even physiological signals sometimes.
To guess emotions.
To infer the underlying emotional state, yes, it's an inference. By integrating these insights, AI can start to move beyond just processing the literal words of a promise and begin to understand, or at least model, some of the subtle human factors that contribute to its meaning and its perceived reliability.
It's almost like AI is learning to read the emotional subtext of human interactions. That's slightly unnerving, but fascinating.
It has huge potential and also significant ethical considerations, of course.
Of course. Now let's shift our focus slightly to the role of belief systems. How do our moral codes, our spiritual convictions, shape how we view promises?
Well, belief systems, whether they're religious, ethical frameworks, cultural traditions, they often place a very, very high value on the act of promising and on keeping one's word.
It's often seen as sacred.
In many traditions, yes, promises are elevated to the level of sacred obligations. Their fulfillment or betrayal might be linked to divine judgment or karmic consequences, or simply one's social standing within the community. It carries real weight.
And AI can delve into understanding that connection between promises and our deeply held beliefs.
It can try. AI can be trained to analyze religious texts, ethical codes, cultural narratives from all over the world.
Looking for patterns again.
Yeah. Identifying the specific roles and significance attributed to promises within these different belief systems, this provides crucial cultural context.
Why is that context important?
Well, it helps understand why certain types of promises might be considered particularly binding or significant within one society compared to another. Context matters enormously.
Okay, we've explored the history, the biology, the philosophy, even the math behind promises. Let's bring it back down to a really personal level now. How do promises, both kept and broken, actually impact us as individuals and the people in our lives?
The source really emphasizes that trust and reliability are like the very lifeblood of our relationships.
Absolutely.
And these qualities are directly cultivated through consistently fulfilling promises, even small ones,
Yeah, I'll call you later.
Exactly. When we keep our word, we strengthen the bonds between us. We foster an environment of mutual cooperation, dependability.
And the opposite, broken promises.
Well, conversely, broken promises chip away at that trust. They lead to suspicion, resentment, and ultimately they can lead to the breakdown of social connections. It's corrosive.
We've all experienced that sting, that sharp pain of a broken promise. What's the typical emotional fallout?
The emotional consequences can be significant and quite varied. Kept promises often generate feelings of security, gratitude, relief, validation. They reinforce positive connections.
Makes you feel good.
Yeah. Broken promises, on the other hand, they can trigger anger, betrayal, deep disappointment, sadness, in more severe cases, even lasting trauma and a real erosion of faith in other people.
It's not just about our individual feelings, though, is it? I mean, the ability to make and rely on promises feels like what holds our entire social structure together.
That's exactly right. From the most intimate sphere of family life all the way up to the vast scale of international relations, the capacity to make and trust in promises is absolutely fundamental.
Couldn't function without it.
No. Without it, essential things like contracts, agreements, even just basic long-term planning would become virtually impossible. You'd have widespread instability, uncertainty, chaos, really.
And how does our track record, whether we generally keep or break our promises, how does that affect our own sense of self, our identity?
That's a really important point. Consistently keeping our promises tends to reinforce our self-perception as trustworthy individuals, people with integrity.
Feel good about yourself.
Right. It contributes to a positive self-image, a sense of personal reliability.
Oh.
Conversely, repeatedly breaking promises, even small ones, can lead to feelings of guilt, shame, a diminished sense of self-worth.
Which can affect future behavior.
Absolutely. It can potentially impact our future interactions and self-confidence. It becomes a cycle sometimes.
So the world around us also reacts to our promises, or lack thereof. It's not just an internal personal matter, is it? Society notices.
Oh, absolutely. Society has built structures around it. Legal systems, for instance, they represent formalized promises, right?
Contracts, laws.
Contracts, laws, constitutional rights, these are all promises backed by legal consequences when they're violated.
And outside the law.
Well, beyond the purely legal realm, societal norms often impose social sanctions for broken promises. These can range from mild disapproval, maybe gossip, to outright ostracism in some communities, and significant damage to your reputation.
And our culture often reinforces the importance of promises through stories, myths, right?
Exactly. Across different cultures, you find countless narratives, myths, folk tales, literature, films that highlight the virtues of keeping one's word and the negative repercussions of breaking trust.
Passing down of values.
Yeah, these stories serve as powerful tools for transmitting societal values about commitment and reliability across generations, even our economic system.
How so?
Think about IOUs, bonds, credit systems. They all fundamentally rely on an underlying promise of future fulfillment. The whole thing runs on trust.
Let's circle back to the ethical dimensions of promises. We touched on that basic conflict earlier, duty versus consequences. How does that tension specifically play out when we consider the ethics of making and breaking promises?
Right, so deontology offers a relatively clear-cut perspective. Making the promise itself creates a moral obligation to fulfill it, period. Regardless of the outcomes, the promise binds you.
The act itself is what matters.
Exactly. Consequentialism, however, brings in that more nuanced view. It argues that the ethicality of breaking a promise should be judged by the overall consequences.
A good argument.
Sometimes, yeah. Is it sometimes the morally right action to break a promise if doing so prevents much greater harm or achieves a significantly better outcome for more people? This creates really complex ethical dilemmas. No easy answers.
It's that age-old philosophical balancing act, isn't it? Sticking to a principle versus considering the real-world impact.
It really is.
What other ethical considerations arise when we talk about promises? It can't just be duty versus outcome.
No, definitely not. We also need to consider the ethical weight of the promiser's original intent versus the actual outcome.
Ah, good intentions gone wrong.
Right. Is a promise broken with genuinely good intentions but unforeseen negative consequences morally equivalent to one broken with malicious intent? Probably not, right?
Seems different.
And furthermore, what about promises made under duress or in situations where there's a significant imbalance of power?
Like a boss promising something to an employee.
Exactly. Are such promises truly binding in the same way, or is there a question about their inherent validity from the start?
These were thorny ethical questions, really complex. How can AI contribute to our understanding here? Can it help navigate these moral landscapes?
Well, an ethically informed AI wouldn't just label a broken promise as bad. That's too simplistic.
Okay.
Instead, it could potentially analyze the surrounding context, what was going on, the stated intentions of the promiser, if known, and the actual consequences that followed for everyone involved.
A more holistic view.
Right. This more nuanced analysis could provide a richer understanding of the ethical dimensions. For example, if an AI were evaluating a political promise, if a political promise that was broken, maybe due to unforeseen global events, it could try to weigh the initial intent against the resulting impact on different groups of people. Not make a judgment, but present the factors.
Provide clarity for human judgment. Life, unfortunately, often throws us curveballs, unexpected challenges. How do human struggles and misfortunes affect our ability to uphold our promises?
Yeah, the source material highlights several critical ways this happens. Extreme hardship, think poverty, the devastation of war, serious illness. These can force individuals into situations where they must break promises, maybe just to survive.
Necessity dictates.
Right. Traumatic experiences, too, can profoundly impact a person's capacity for trust, and therefore their ability to make and maintain commitments in the future.
That makes sense.
Addiction is another big one. It can cloud judgment, impair impulse control, leading to a destructive cycle of broken promises. Even things like greed or outright lying are fundamentally antithetical to the spirit of a promise.
And sometimes it's just bad luck.
Absolutely. Unforeseen circumstances, a sudden economic collapse, a natural disaster can simply render previously viable promises impossible to fulfill, no matter the intention.
It's a stark reminder that our best intentions can be derailed by forces completely beyond our control.
Yeah.
Can AI help us understand these intricate connections between adversity and promise-keeping?
Yes, I think it can offer insights. By analyzing vast amounts of data, maybe anonymized narratives related to human struggles, economic data, health records, AI can look for statistical correlations.
Finding patterns again.
Finding patterns between specific types of adversity and observed patterns of promise-keeping behavior. This could potentially lead to the development of more empathetic AI systems.
Empathetic AI.
Well, systems that are better equipped to recognize the complex realities and constraints people face when they make and try to honor commitments. Understanding the context better.
Shifting gears once more, let's talk about art, music, paintings, literature, film. How does art, in its various forms, reflect this fundamental human experience of promising?
Oh, art serves as a really powerful lens for exploring the complexities of human promise. It's everywhere when you look for it.
How so?
It tells compelling stories, right? Stories of unwavering loyalty, devastating betrayal, commitments fiercely upheld against all odds, or carelessly discarded.
Drama comes from promises kept or broken.
Exactly. By allowing us to vicariously experience the emotional weight of these scenarios, art builds empathy. It helps us understand the profound impact of promises on the human spirit.
And it passes on ideas.
Definitely. It also acts as a cultural repository, transmitting societal values around trust and commitment across generations, just like those myths we talked about.
So art is like a mirror, reflecting our collective relationship with promises in all its beauty and, well, its heartbreak sometimes.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And can AI analyze that reflection in a meaningful way? Can it read the art?
It's starting to. AI, particularly in fields like computational creativity and emotional AI, can analyze artistic works, texts, images, even music to some extent.
To find what?
To identify recurring themes and motifs related to promises. It can try to map out the emotional arcs of narratives involving commitment and betrayal. Some systems are even experimenting with generating new artistic content that explores these timeless human dilemmas.
Wow. Okay. Let's talk about our immediate emotional responses to promises.
Yeah.
We all react, don't we, when a promise is made to us or when we break one ourselves?
Indeed. Very visceral reactions often. Laughter, feelings of happiness, relief. These often accompany the fulfillment of a joyful promise, maybe a surprise that brings delight.
The good side.
Right. Conversely, crying, anger, resentment, even aggressive behavior sometimes, these can be triggered by that profound sense of betrayal that often follows a broken promise.
And what shapes that reaction?
Often, the crucial factor is the perceived intent behind the action. Was a promise broken maliciously with disregard? Or were there genuine, perhaps unavoidable, extenuating circumstances?
Intent matters hugely.
Massively. That distinction significantly influences the emotional fallout and the ethical judgment, too.
And AI can try to decipher those emotional cues, connect them to the act of promising. How?
Well, AI has the capability to analyze extensive data sets of human interactions. Think social media exchanges, news reports covering public commitments and their outcomes, even fictional portrayals of promises in books and films.
Looking for links between words and emotions.
Essentially, yes. By identifying patterns and correlations between specific events making, keeping, or breaking promises and the emotional responses expressed around those events, AI can begin to build a more nuanced, data-driven understanding of the human emotional landscape surrounding our commitments.
This whole discussion has been so intricate, covering so many angles. It makes you realize how even something seemingly basic like concentration, just being able to focus, plays a vital role in this entire concept of a promise.
That's a really crucial insight, actually. The ability to focus our attention, to fully grasp the implications of a promise we're making, to clearly articulate our commitment, and then, importantly, to diligently execute the steps needed to fulfill it. All of that depends heavily on our capacity for concentration.
And our fundamental state of well-being. Are we healthy, rested? That directly impacts our ability to concentrate, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's fundamental. When our basic needs, health, nutrition, hydration, rest, sleep, when those aren't adequately met, our cognitive functions just suffer.
Including concentration.
Including concentration, memory for commitments. It's all significantly impaired. And this, in turn, directly affects our capacity to make and, crucially, to keep our promises.
And stress plays a role, too.
Huge role. Our social and material well-being are intertwined here. Stress related to, say, financial insecurity or job loss can severely impact concentration and the ability to follow through on commitments, even if you want to.
So someone facing significant challenges in just basic survival might have a very different, maybe more strained relationship with the concept of promises compared to someone more secure.
It stands to reason, yes. The practical ability to follow through might be compromised.
Can AI help us recognize and understand those disparities?
Yeah.
Can it see how circumstances affect this?
Potentially. AI could monitor various indicators of well-being, perhaps anonymized physiological data from wearables, or patterns of behavior indicative of high stress or sleep deprivation found in other data.
Okay.
By correlating this data with observed promise-keeping behavior across diverse populations again, ethically and anonymously, AI might identify patterns. It could offer insights into how different life circumstances impact our ability to uphold commitments.
It's fascinating to consider when our understanding of promises even began to develop, both for us as a species and now for AI as a technology. They seem like very different timelines.
Hugely different. For humans, the source suggests a very gradual evolutionary trajectory, not a single aha moment.
Tied to other developments.
Exactly. Closely linked to the development of abstract thought, the capacity for future planning, forming more complex social bonds, and likely evolving right alongside sophisticated language.
A slow burn over millennia.
Right. For AI, the journey is, well, incredibly recent in comparison. It really started with rule-based expert systems maybe a few decades ago.
If X, then Y.
Kind of. Then advancing through big breakthroughs in natural language processing, machine learning, deep learning, emotional AI, game theory. It's been accelerating rapidly.
So AI's comprehension of promises is still, relatively speaking, in its infancy compared to our own species' long history with this concept.
Absolutely. Infancy is a good word. And it's vital, really vital, to remember that an AI's understanding of a promise is fundamentally different from human comprehension.
How so?
It's based on its ability to process and analyze massive amounts of data, to identify patterns and relationships. It doesn't possess the same kind of conscious awareness or personal investment or lived experience that we humans bring to a promise.
It's not feeling the weight of it.
Exactly. Its understanding emerges from statistical correlations and algorithmic processing, not from consciousness or empathy.
Okay. So with all these different lenses, history, biology, philosophy, tech, through which we can examine promises, how can AI practically contribute to improving our human understanding of them? What can it do for us?
Well, the source outlines several key areas where AI's unique capabilities could be really valuable. First, AI excels at contextual analysis on massive data sets.
Seeing the bigger picture.
Right, allowing it to potentially identify the specific circumstances surrounding promises, factors like power dynamics, cultural norms, historical context that might influence them. It can also develop sophisticated predictive models.
Predicting if a promise will be kept.
Estimating the likelihood, yeah. Based on historical data, maybe the promiser's track record, current stressors, incentives, various influencing variables.
You even included a simplified example formula in the source material to illustrate that predictive capability, just showing how factors could be weighted.
Yes, just a basic illustration to make the concept clearer. How different factors could be weighted to generate a probabilistic assessment. It's complex in reality, of course.
Of course. What else?
Beyond prediction, AI can be trained on ethical frameworks.
To do what? Make ethical judgments.
Not judgments, but to provide us with reasoned analyses of the moral implications of various promise-related scenarios. Laying out the ethical arguments from different perspectives, it's learned.
Like that philosophical assistant again.
Kind of. It can even be designed to simulate empathetic responses in its interactions, which could potentially facilitate more constructive dialogues around broken promises, maybe in mediation. Furthermore, AI could assist in conflict resolution by analyzing the details of disputes arising from broken commitments and suggesting potential paths toward resolution. And on a personal level, it could offer personalized reminders, organizational tools.
Helping us not forget.
Exactly. Helping us keep track of our own promises and maybe even identifying potential obstacles before they trip us up.
It sounds like AI could become a genuinely valuable tool for navigating the often complex, sometimes messy world of human promises. Could it actually make our lives easier in this regard?
It certainly has the potential to, I think. By offering better organizational tools and timely reminders, AI could help reduce the stress and negative consequences of unintentionally broken promises, just helping us manage.
Less falling through the cracks.
Right. By potentially fostering greater transparency and accountability, maybe through things like smart contracts or verifiable credential systems, it could contribute to building stronger trust in relationships and professional settings.
What about managing expectations?
Yeah, AI could perhaps analyze communication patterns to help us better manage our expectations regarding promises made by others. Maybe spotting ambiguity or unrealistic commitments, mitigating disappointment down the line.
And in work settings?
In professional environments, you could see AI automating certain aspects of accountability, tracking project commitments, flagging potential delays. And in therapeutic contexts, it might even assist individuals in processing the emotional impact of broken trust, perhaps through specialized chatbots.
That all sounds quite promising.
Yep.
Pardon the pun.
Yeah.
But what are the essential things we humans absolutely need to keep in mind about the way AI understands, or more accurately, doesn't understand human promises? What are the caveats?
Okay, this is crucial. The most important thing to remember is that AI, as it currently exists, lacks consciousness. It lacks personal integrity in the human sense. It lacks the full spectrum of human emotions that truly underpin our deep understanding of promises.
It's processing, not feeling.
Exactly. Its analysis is based on data and algorithms, not on genuine empathy or a felt sense of moral obligation. That's a huge difference.
Miles.
There's also the inherent risk of bias. AI models learn from data, and if that data reflects existing societal prejudices or flawed assumptions about reliability or trustworthiness based on group identity,
The AI can inherit those biases.
it absolutely can, and that's dangerous. So ultimately, AI should be viewed as a powerful tool to augment our own understanding and decision-making.
An assistant, not a replacement.
Precisely, not a replacement for our own empathy, our own moral judgment, and our personal responsibility when it comes to making and keeping promises. And transparency in how AI models arrive at their conclusions is also paramount. We need to know why it's suggesting something.
So looking at the present landscape, who are the main beneficiaries right now? Who's getting the most value from AI's current level of understanding regarding human promises?
Well, currently, the organizations that tend to benefit most are those dealing with a large volume of commitments and interactions where tracking and prediction are valuable.
Like businesses?
Yeah, businesses for managing contracts, supply chains, customer service promises. Legal systems are starting to use it for analyzing precedents, identifying potential breaches of agreement in large document sets.
Finance?
Financial institutions, definitely. For assessing credit risk, the reliability of borrowers, that's all promise-based. And researchers, of course, who can leverage AI to model human behavior related to promises on a much larger scale than ever before.
This has been a truly illuminating deep dive, just exploring the multifaceted nature of human promises, especially seeing it through this added lens of artificial intelligence. It really changes things.
It does.
It's clear that it's a far, far more intricate concept than just, saying, I'll do something.
Absolutely. By examining its deep historical roots, its biological underpinnings, the philosophical dimensions, its impact on our individual lives, and the very fabric of society. And now, this emerging role of AI in analyzing it all, we just gain a much richer, more nuanced appreciation for this fundamental aspect of what it means to be human, its core.
So, as you, our listener, take a moment now to reflect on this deep dive. Maybe consider this. How does this more comprehensive understanding of the human promise, with all its complexities, its fragility, its power, its nuances, how does that change the way you perceive your own commitments and the promises that are made to you?
Yeah, what new questions arise?
Exactly. What new questions or insights arise for you about the crucial roles of trust and reliability, not just in your daily interactions, but in the broader world around you too? It's certainly given me a lot to contemplate.
Me too.
Thank you for joining us for this exploration on the deep dive.
This is DigitView.